So I love Oldham County Schools. I love the work that we do here. I want to thank all of you for being here today. It's always just a treat when we get to showcase the work that our teachers and especially our kids do on a daily basis, and you get to see the product of a lot of hard work that goes into what we do. So I had the opportunity to tour the governor around the building. We got to stop in Christy Vaughn's third grade class where they were doing some community building, answered a question of the day, found out that the governor's dog really likes to play in the snow. That's one of his favorite things on a snow day. We got a refresher on multiplying using decimals in Ms. Stryker's fifth grade classroom, so it was good. The kids did great. I think the governor got a refresher there. So, and then we went down to Ms. Connell's art room. She does a fantastic job giving the kids choice and putting a lot of different materials in their hands and just really allowing them to be creative and to express themselves, which is so important for them as they develop. So it's just really hard to overstate the importance of the work that we do in this building and in our community and in Oldham County, and I know across the Commonwealth as well. It's going to be very hard to find a group of professionals that work as hard as the people do in our schools on behalf of kids. And I just want to, thank the governor for being here to highlight public education. All kids have the right to a quality public education, and I'm just very excited that we have the opportunity to highlight that today. So I guess without further ado, I'd like to introduce the governor of the Commonwealth of Kentucky, Andy Beshear.
Well, thank you, Principal, for having us today. It has been a great morning at Harmony, getting reminded just how hard every one of our public school educators work every single day. That's everyone from those teaching in the classroom to that giant lunchroom and everybody it takes to keep that orderly and working. You see a building like this, and it's such an amazing living ecosystem of people who take our kids for those hours of the day and put everything they have into their profession, trying to create both the best scholars and help us to create the very best people. Getting to see everything from math, where our kids now are taught two different ways to do it, including ways we were traditionally taught, and ways where, admittedly, after watching my kids do it, you can do it a little bit faster, even if it's a little different. To seeing all those creative minds in art and what they're going to learn and how it's going to help them to creatively problem solve is pretty exciting. And then to just get to spend a moment talking to these young people that are going to become such amazing adults and contributors in the Commonwealth, and reminding them how much their educators in this building work for them and invest in them. And you can see it on the looks of every single one of these young people's faces, how much they appreciate the educators in this building. So I want to thank our principal for hosting us, Superintendent Radford, who's going to speak to us in a minute. We got Judge David Vogel, who is here as well. I want to thank each of them for everything they do to support public education. Supporting public education is how we build a better Kentucky. I know this because I'm a proud graduate of Kentucky's public schools, and both of my kids are in Kentucky's public schools. So my wife, Brittany, and I understand the worries, concerns, excitements that parents have, and the true desire we have for each of our kids, but I hope for everyone else's kids, to get the very best in our public schools. Your Lieutenant Governor is an integral part of this administration, and having someone who was a public educator, a classroom teacher, and an administrator, I think helps us to not only relate, but never forget about the people we need to be listening to about how we move forward. That's why we work hard to support public education and support our public educators. One way we've done that is to improve safety projects around our schools so everyone can arrive and get home safely. That's one of the reasons that I'm back at Harmony for my second time today. In 2021, we announced that our transportation cabinet was working to complete safety improvements near public schools. We spent $24.5 million in state funds to help fund 66 projects around 43 counties, ranging from new turn lanes to new crosswalks to improve pavement markings and signage. At the end of 2023, 30 projects were completed or near completed. That includes some right here at Harmony Elementary and the surrounding schools on the North Oldham campus. I was here at this school to present a ceremonial check to make sure we could get that crosswalk that is now outside installed, and I'm told there's some lights or some other improvements
Yes,
that are coming maybe even later this week,
that's my understanding.
because I checked in on it
Thank you.
and want to make sure that we get these improvements done as quickly as possible. It was also serving our families, hearing those, especially in the neighborhood next door, talk about their safety concerns and what this can mean there. Just make sure every single one of these learners shows up safe and sound and gets home the same way. As you all know, Kentucky Highway 1793 serves as an access route for North Oldham High School, North Oldham Middle School, and Harmony Elementary. The funding we presented went towards the design and construction of much needed turn lanes as well to reduce traffic backup. And that work is almost complete. So far, crosswalks have been installed at each of the schools, turn lanes have been created, and new flashers are going to be installed. That's just one type of investment that we need in our schools. And as we think about investments over the past 4 years, yes, we've made some progress. We protected educators' pensions. By working with the General Assembly, we secured modest raises, funded full-day kindergarten, and invested $250 million in our career and technical programs so that everyone has a path, whether it's to higher education or to a good job. We've also raised the per pupil elementary and secondary education funding by 7.5%, the biggest hike since 2008, but it doesn't come close to making up for the funds that couldn't be provided during those years of the Great Recession. At the same time, we've had the biggest increase in post-secondary education funding since the Great Recession. But if we want our children to get the best education possible, we absolutely have to do more. That's why we introduced our Forward Together budget proposal to do just that. It adds over $1.5 billion in education, public education funding, because more than that would have been spent over the last 10 to 12 years where those dollars weren't available. It starts with an 11% pay raise, fully funded in that budget to every single public school employee. It makes sure that we have enough counselors, enough bus drivers, and yes, enough teachers. The National Education Association has some pretty tough statistics that explain why we have the number of vacancies that we have. They rank us as 44th in starting teacher pay. 44th. At a time when we're number 2 in per capita economic development, our economy is booming. We're building the 2 largest battery plants on planet Earth. We are the premier location for companies to invest in. We can't keep that going if we're 44th in starting teacher pay and 40th in average teacher pay. We have to do better. And I believe it's pretty simple. You cannot give a child every opportunity if you don't have a full-time teacher in every classroom. We don't have enough bus drivers. So what should we do? We should pay them more. It works. When we provided pay raises to state troopers, we got more. When we provided pay raises to corrections officers, we got more. When we needed more people in our Department of Juvenile Justice and raised pay, we got more. The only area where we as a state haven't stepped up and passed a budget that truly helps is for our educators, and now is the time. If we don't act, we will also not remain competitive with other states. You think about those numbers, 44th and 40th. Well, here's what that raise would do. It'd move us to 24th in starting teacher pay and 25th in average teacher salaries, and we could do that in 1 year. Now, you think about what that would do for these individuals. So many of them working 2 jobs. With what we ask of public school educators, with how we tell them we value them, a public school educator should never have to get a second job just to make ends meet. When I gave my state of the Commonwealth, we had an educator too from Muhlenberg County, one I'd met cleaning up after the tornadoes. He's driving the biggest dump truck I've ever seen. I got up and I figured he was working for some company. He's a high school teacher. Since they didn't have school that day, with everything that had come through, he'd come down to help. Well, he and his wife, he's a 30-year educator, she's a 20-year educator, are both working second jobs to send their kids to college. That's not right. And that's not how we treat people that we truly value. So think about what it can mean for recruitment, but also think about what it can mean for some of our communities. Remember, in so many counties, the public school system is the largest employer. So think about what that raise means as an economic infusion in that area. Teacher salaries alone make up 10% or more of all wages paid in 26 counties. Think about that, including your neighbor in Trimble County. So the impact of an 11% raise for our public school educators isn't just in this building. It's in every small business, in every town, and in every county across the Commonwealth. States around us get it. Tennessee just enacted the largest teacher raise in their history. They did it intentionally, they funded it, they required it, and they're now bragging about being top 10 in the country. Indiana is talking about doing the same. Last session, they did what we've done in the past, which is not to provide the true funding necessary to make it happen. And they claim they're going to make up for it this time. That is our competition to the south and to the north. But in this budget session, when we've had the three biggest budget surpluses of all time, more recurring revenue than at any time in my lifetime, we can not only afford these raises, but we can afford everything else that need to come along with the raises. One is fully funding pupil transportation. We're real close to a county that's had a lot of news about their busing. But at a time when we haven't funded raises to have enough bus drivers, and that county alone was short of $20 million in per pupil transportation. Now is the time, and we have the dollars to truly do it. Now is also the time to make sure that every single one of these young learners shows up to kindergarten ready. Folks, we live in a commonwealth where while we say we love and care and invest in our kids, over half of them show up and are not kindergarten ready. Over half. That is a failing grade. That's why our budget would fund universal pre-K for every 4-year-old at a price of about $172 million a year again, something that we can more than afford. The Department of Education estimates 34,000 Kentucky children that don't get pre-K services would get it, and we would open up a ton of other childcare slots. That's because right now, we've got a number of childcare slots that are funded for 4-year-olds. Them joining universal pre-K would open up about 4,000 slots for childcare all over Kentucky. So in doing this, and in supporting childcare for the same time, we not only make sure we have the enrichment services that have every child ready for kindergarten, but we also provide more parents out there with options that can get them back to work. Time and time again across the country, universal pre-K has been the #1 most effective and fastest way to boost workforce participation. Now is the time to do it in Kentucky. Our budget proposal also helps our educators in things they're asked to do, like getting continuing education, textbooks, and technology. What we have seen is that our school systems in our cities and our counties are ready, but we are asking them to do so much without providing the funding that's really even required under state law. That's why this budget, just like every one that I've submitted, is an education-first budget. I will tell you the House has released theirs, and there are a number of issues with it, from the largest cuts in state government positions, in fact, that we have ever seen in some of our cabinets. Would cut over 180 positions in the Department of Juvenile Justice, where we've been told to do better. Over 240 positions in corrections, and cut 90 state police positions. And if applied to transportation, over 640 positions in that cabinet. But if we focus on education, it does not fund the raises that we know we need to stay competitive. And while they say they are raising, and they are, the seat per pupil funding. We know that property valuations are up. We have fewer students. And in fact, in the second year of their budget, it's the same amount of funding as in this current year. In other words, no big increases when you look at the straight dollars that are coming to our schools. And just like the last one, a failure to fully fund pupil transportation and so many of the other pieces that are necessary. Here's the good news. It is early in the budget process. There is time. And a budget at the best time in terms of dollars coming in with real chances to invest actually borrows more, the second most than any budget in history. We have to do this differently. Now, the legislature's excited that we were able to decrease income tax 2 separate times. But to do that in the long term, we've got to keep our economy going. We've got to invest in infrastructure and public education and making sure that we have the best workforce that's out there. We need to make sure that we're not making bad decisions in the short term to try to cut 0.5% that will keep us in the long term from realizing our place as an economic powerhouse and giving each of these children the best opportunities that they can have. That's why I'm going to continue fighting. And I know our education community is too, for real funding, significant funding, additional funding that can ensure that we have the personnel that we need in our schools. Our plan values every single person that works in this building. Knowing each of them down to the custodian is indispensable. Trust me, the pandemic taught us how important those individuals are. And I made everyone in the Capitol a Kentucky Colonel because they took care of us at one of the most important times. Folks, we can do this. Public education isn't red or blue. It's not D or R. It serves virtually all of our children, and in some areas in the state, it is the only provider of education. This is who we trust with our kids for multiple hours a day. It's time that we pay them and invest in them in the way that we talk about them. And this budget is a good time and a good place to start. Now, life's short. I think we're supposed to do good things and be kind to each other. And part of living out that mantra is investing in schools like this. I'm now going to introduce Dr. Radford, the superintendent here in Oldham County. We appreciate all of his hard work. Thanks for having us today.
Thank you, Governor Beshear. I'd like to say a few words and recognize a few of our folks. First, I'd like to welcome the governor and his team to Oldham County and to Harmony Elementary. Mr. Fiorini, I'd like to appreciate and just recognize you and your staff, and certainly our students here at Harmony for being so inviting as we did our visit today. We have several of our board members here present today. I want to recognize them and appreciate all of their support and their work. County Judge Executive Judge Vogel, members of the media, and so many of our staff. Thank you for being here. I want to just point out a couple of quick things. First, just to echo what Governor Beshear had mentioned, this road safety project and supporting the work here on 1793. Certainly that's been a concern, and we appreciate the support for that to happen, to support our students, because safety is paramount for our students in multiple ways. And this certainly illustrates that state commitment to that. So thank you. Secondly, just like to recognize and just continue to say, as we work diligently to support our students, we want to recruit and retain the very best staff, the very best teachers and staff to support students, to support their learning. As you can see, if you were here today or this morning, we have outstanding students, and we have staff that greatly care about their well-being and their growth as individuals to become productive members of society. So we want to continue to do all that we can to elevate the profession and to support our teachers and our staff. So again, thank you, Governor Beshear, and thanks to everyone. I'll turn it back over to Governor Beshear, and he's going to recognize our next person.
Great. I'm remiss that I did not recognize our school board members, because it is hard to be a school board member, but incredibly important and absolutely thankless. Thank you all for what you do. I've been to several of my son's district school board meetings, and thank you for your tireless work. Keep it up, and we are with you. Now we're going to hear from Ethan Moore. For the last 20 years, Mr. Moore has worked in the Oldham County School District and currently serves as an exceptional child instructor at South Oldham High School. Ethan, thanks for coming.
Thank you. Thanks, Rick.
Appreciate it. Appreciate you.
Good afternoon. My name is Ethan Moore, and as the governor said, this is my 20th year in the district. I've been fortunate enough to spend my entire career at South Oldham High School, and I'm honored to speak on behalf of my colleagues in this great district. I sincerely appreciate the advocacy of our profession from Dr. Radford, our board, and our governor and lieutenant governor and staff. Something I stress to my students every day is that communication is key, especially when it's in person and not over social media. And while I say that, I can picture them rolling their eyes at me right now. I'd like to take this opportunity, though, to communicate the importance of passing the governor's budget proposal as it relates to public education. We find ourselves at a crossroad of truly moving public education forward. It is vital to fully fund transportation, pre-K, full-day kindergarten, and increase SEEK funding by a minimum of $325 per student over the next 2 years or 4 years and back to the 2008 levels when you adjust it for inflation. The financial health of the Commonwealth is strong and the state can fund this. So my question is, why not? Today, across the Commonwealth, districts are facing teacher, bus driver, and substitute teacher shortages at record levels. In our district, we don't have nearly the same amount of candidates for these openings that we did a decade or so ago, with special education, math, and science feeling the brunt of it. The low starting salary and the salary throughout our career track is the main driver in this trend. Under Dr. Radford and our board's leadership, we have seen a 7% raise over the last 2 years when counting the annual step increase. But make no mistake, there's more work to do to make our salaries more competitive with other industries. And Governor, we're on the same page with your notes because I cited the National Education Association. Kentucky does rank 44th nationally in starting teacher pay at just $38,000 a year and 40th in terms of average teacher salary. Our friends in the North, Indiana, ranked 29th, and Illinois is 23rd. In addition, according to the Kentucky Center of Economic Policy, teacher pay fell 5% last year when adjusted for inflation. Kentucky teachers earned $9,700 less last school year compared to 15 years ago in inflation-adjusted terms, almost $10,000. To put it bluntly, if we want to attract the best and brightest to teach Kentucky's future, we've got to do a lot better than this. And Governor Beshear's proposal is a giant step forward in making that happen. As the governor mentioned with the SEEK funding, last year a segment of the legislature told us that the increase in SEEK funding would allow for raises, but that it was up to individual districts to make that happen. Well, the districts, some districts could provide for moderate raises, others couldn't provide for any at all. That is the issue that we're facing now. When funded, we need funded across the board raises mandated for our public education employees across all sectors. In the 2022 budget, state workers got a mandated 8% raise. They deserved it then, but our public school employees deserve mandated raises at this time. We have access to the monies at the state level, as has been widely reported, to allow for our teachers and staff to receive this substantial raise. We want to work together so that all of our students can learn at the highest levels by sending a message far and wide that we are serious about recruiting and retaining the best teachers and staff in our public schools. Let's do our part to make this happen. The state has the money to fund it, so why not? In closing, our public school educators have the awesome responsibility to lay the foundation for success. Education is the catalyst for the next generation to serve our communities. Teaching the next crop of mechanics, lawyers, plumbers, electricians, doctors, factory workers, etc., is of vital importance for our communities. And with that, we need the governor's budget passed to recruit and retain quality faculty and staff. Teachers, administrators, bus drivers, counselors, aides, custodians have all been stretched too thin and have been for quite some time. The state has the money to fund it, so why not? Thank you.
All right, you're going to be seeing Ethan in Frankfurt a lot, but I do want to commend the school district because that's one of the largest raises that was provided statewide, and there weren't sufficient funds for all of the needs provided by the state. So that's the school board and administration. really saying that this has to happen and sacrificing in other ways. So thank you for that. And Ethan's right. State workers, we've been able to significantly move the needle. In fact, by the end of some other changes we make, just about everyone in state government will have seen about a 20% raise over the past 4 to 6 years. And while our educators aren't technically state employees, we share benefits. We all work to fund the different retirement systems, and in fairness, ought to see that same type of increase that, again, we know works. So I want to thank Harmony. I want to thank the school districts for having us today. To the people of Kentucky, make your voice heard. Public education is something that we all believe in, and now we need you to call your state representatives and senators, send emails, do everything you can, and ask them to increase the support to public education in the budget, to pass that across the board raise, to fund universal pre-K, and then we all move forward together. All right, we'll open it up for questions if you have any.
My first question is about transportation with JCPS. What are you hoping to see happen with this budget that can not only help that district, Oldham County, and all the districts deal with these bus driver shortages?
Yeah, there are two things that we have to do from the state side to help our school systems when it comes to busing. Number one, provide a raise so they can hire enough bus drivers. Remember, this is a competitive economy, and to get people to come work at a job, you got to pay the wage that is attractive enough to get them to come. But the second is state law says that we are to fully fund people transportation. And what happens every year is in the budget, they notwithstand that language, they freeze it. They pass another law saying they're not going to follow the law. And then they don't fully fund it. And that requires districts to use dollars they would use for other things, maybe their own pre-K programs, maybe other raises. Those are the two things on the transportation side the state needs to do. In the last budget, when it comes to Jefferson County, the budget's short of Jefferson County about $20 million. And listen, there's enough fault to go around in the busing problems and challenges that have been seen, some from the private sector that were hired, maybe some from the overall planning on the school district. And I believe the superintendent has taken responsibility for that. But the state and the General Assembly have to take some responsibility too if we're not providing that full funding.
Do you think the General Assembly has some blame to take on with the issues that JCPS continues to have even into January?
Yes, they did not fully fund people transportation, and people transportation is not being conducted in the way that it needs to be. If you've got a legal duty to fund something and you come up $20 million short, yeah, you've got responsibility there. And here's the thing, they get to, in the second year of this next budget, about 90%, but those are critical dollars. I mean, missing 10% of your required amount in one year and probably about 15 in the other mean that schools have to cannibalize money going to other places. And every single dollar that goes into a school system is ultimately spent for the benefit of the kids. Whether it's the staff that's necessary for them, the learning materials that goes in, the continuing education so our educators can help our kids catch up post-pandemic. I mean, every time we short our schools money, we're not providing that full investment in our children. And when we think about a booming economy, it is really short-sighted to not fully fund our public education system right now. I mean, if we do that with the jobs we have coming in, we would be close to full, great employment for our Kentuckians for the next decades and in jobs that we'd only dreamed of. But at some point, these companies are going to start looking and asking and questioning different outcomes. And again, we ask our schools to give us the very best outcomes, the very best students, the very best people about to enter the workforce. But if we don't invest in them, we can't expect the outcomes that we demand.
And as you mentioned, it is still early on in the process. The
Yes.
Senate is still getting together as well. Have you been negotiating with the Senate at all to see what priorities you guys can come together on in terms of education?
And those meetings will be set up. And I will say last time, the House submitted an executive branch budget that included education before the governor's proposed budget, which also is contrary to law and how it's worked in all 49 other states. And that budget didn't start out well at all. It got a lot better when it went to the Senate. So this is a long process. It looks like this time the House isn't going to rush it through. It looks like they're going to hold some hearings. So there is first an opportunity while it is in the House to push for changes. And then there is a second opportunity when it goes to the Senate. And then there'll be a conference committee, which will present a third opportunity. We will stay active in each and every way. Now, sometimes that's being strategic in how we're active. Sometimes you will hear me more publicly than in others. To me, it's whatever can get the job done. But what we saw in the past is it's pressure from people's constituents. It's pressure from parents. It's pressure from people who just want the best for their grandkids, but ultimately get things funded in that budget, and that's what we need.
Speaking of pressure, school choice sounds like it is going to move through the House potentially. There's a bill with a lot of sponsors. We know your feelings about school choice, but how could that impact Kentuckians? And what do you do moving forward to November to educate voters on that?
If the House and the Senate pass a bill that creates a constitutional amendment, I will certainly oppose it. And what that does is take public school dollars and send them to unaccountable private schools, typically run by for-profit corporations. You do not see better results in many places. Some states have worse test scores, but it's effectively giving up on public education and defunding it. It's driven by corporate interests that want some of the money that otherwise goes into public education, and it's wrong. And the thing that gets me most about the arguments that are made is that they want to have less restrictions on the private schools that they're going to send these public dollars to than they do on the public schools. Well, if you think the restrictions are what's holding public schools back, let's remove them. And then let's invest in innovation all around Kentucky. You see school districts, school boards, and others that create schools within schools, magnet schools, other programs, different career and technical tracks. We see so much innovation that I believe anything that these outside for-profit charter schools can offer, we can offer in the public school system itself. But we have to be willing to be just as flexible with our public school system. The reason that you don't see that is this is more about greed and dollars than it is about truly investing in public education. That's how I really feel.
Are you satisfied with how 1793 has progressed over the years since you've been back here? What more would you like to see with the safety for the students here?
Oh, for student safety?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so student safety, I'm a parent of kids that have been in schools with bomb threats, with active shooter threats. I know what it's like to have that fear that grips you when you hear about it. I'm somebody that's lost one of his best friends to a mass shooting that occurred in Louisville about 8 months ago. I continue to believe that we need trained SROs in every single school. And then I believe they need to be armed SROs. That's people there for the worst of the worst if it happens. And I know that there are different opinions that come from good places, but I want to make sure at that most dangerous situation that our kids are protected and someone has the means to ultimately protect them. The other thing we see going on, which we see here with everybody signed in, with the school doors and how they're locked, is continued improvement on the physical plant of our schools. It's hard to talk about schools this way, but we have to turn soft targets into hard targets. And our school systems have done a really good job. And everything I've seen today, Principal, is you all have been really thoughtful on how you know everybody that's in the building, on how you ensure that you can cut off access to classrooms. Those are just as important of investments. And we need to make sure that we have the dollars for physical plant improvements that'll help move that forward. I won't be satisfied with school safety until no child gets hurt coming to school, no child gets hurt leaving school, and no child is ever hurt or at risk inside of the school. As a parent. All right. Thank you all very much.
Real quick,
Oh,
regarding,
sure.
regarding the budget bill
Yeah.
proposed last week, how do you plan to convince the GOP to adopt some of your proposals?
Well, first thing we've got to do is talk to all the membership. You know, the budget proposal that's in didn't have the buy-in from all the members. Most of them didn't know what was in it until it came out. Take, for instance, the $71 million in repairs that it doesn't fund for state parks that was in the last budget. You know, we can't continue to provide the experience we need if we can't paint the rooms or replace the leaking ceilings. And over the last budget, representatives who are in districts with those state parks came to us and said, why aren't the repairs being done? And we said, you voted for a budget that didn't allow it. Well, they're getting more active this time. So it's about communicating both to the public and to those individuals what is in it and what's not in it and what the repercussions and consequences are. But let me just say this. I may have some influence over a representative that's of a different party, and I know a lot of them well. But the people of their district, the parents, the business community, the educational leadership, all probably have more influence day to day on that single individual. We would not have passed things like sports betting and medical marijuana if it was not people in those districts creating the pressure to make it happen. And that's the way our government is set up. That's why a representative has a certain area that they represent and a senator has a slightly larger area. It's because their real job isn't to be a part of Team R or Team D. It's to do the very best they can for those people in the area that elect them. And if we can see people come out and make their voices heard, we've seen a lot of things that people said would never happen, actually happen.
Governor, one more question
Sure.
about the Safer Kentucky Act. Both as governor and also a practicing or an attorney, what do you think of those points that have been coming forward so far?
This is a bill that has a whole lot of different pieces. Let me just say that everyone deserves to feel safe in their home and in their community. And there are a number of people, especially in our bigger cities, that don't currently feel safe. That means we should take action. The question is, what action? I can tell you that there are some things in the budget that make us safer that haven't been funded. There's a cut of about 90 Kentucky State Troopers. There's no additional funding for addiction treatment in jails and in prisons on top of what we have, and no extra funding for reentry services. Right now, we have the lowest recidivism rate in our history, meaning fewer people offending once they get out. That makes us safer in the long run. There's some pieces of it that I agree with, at least in part. Not having a specific carjacking statute is a problem, and how we track it and how we approach it. I think when you think of something like a 3 strikes you're outlaw, you need to look at the very specific crimes that they are talking about. Right now they're talking about all quote unquote violent offenses. There's a big difference between murder and attempted murder and the lowest level of those. And so trying to get it right in terms of the policy, I'm not an ideologue, I'm practical. And there are some offenses that if somebody's committed 3 times, yeah, that ought to be it. Maybe even 2 times, and that ought to be it. But I think we need to be really surgical about how we go about it, especially because there's less funding in the budget for corrections, where we'll ultimately have to house them. All right, thank you all very much. Thank you all.
Yes. Thank you. Thanks for coming.
That rate, outstanding. I only know one square district. That's a good deal. Yeah.
Rightfully.
Well, and that's in between, like I said, that and the number of individuals there is. The same amount, like 2 years from now, as there is right now in their budget. Yeah. Right. And that's one of the things. Okay. Well, we're pushing forward.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you all. Okay. Sure. That's it. Just ask Joe and we can work that through the system. No, we get proclamation. So if you have a draft of what you'd like to see in it. Okay. Great. Great. No, it's not. The last article, that sounds one.
They want me to do push up 13.
Oh my God. Yeah.
Yeah.